Have you ever wondered why some families have been poor for 3 generations? Same country, same city, sometimes even the same neighborhood. Different people, different eras, different choices, same outcome. The answer has nothing to do with laziness, bad choices, or lack of ambition. Buffett himself identified this. He called it the Ovarian lottery, the idea that where you are born and into what circumstances determines more of your outcome than almost anything else you do afterward. This is not about blame. This is about mechanism. The system has a structure. That structure has a cost, and the people at the bottom pay it every single day. Understanding how the mechanism works is the first step toward understanding how to break free from it. In 2022, a person in the bottom 20% of American income paid a higher effective rate of interest, fees, and costs than someone in the top 20%. Payday loans at 391% APR, check cashing fees on every paycheck, higher insurance premiums in lower-income zip codes, utility deposits for customers without credit history, overdraft fees hitting hardest on accounts with the smallest balances. Poverty is not just a financial state. It is a continuous tax on existing in that state. Every single day costs more when you have less. The cause is not behavioral. It is architectural. The system is built to extract more from those who have less, and it does so efficiently, legally, and at scale. Buffett was the first to publicly admit this. He created the concept he calls the Ovarian lottery. He described it for a group of Omaha high school students. Imagine that 2 hours before you are born, you get to design the economic rules of the world you will live in, but you don't get to choose who you will be. You would be terrified. Because the chance of being born in the United States in the 20th century, with the specific aptitude for finance that the market rewards, is a fraction of a fraction. He said 90% of what he has is because of where and when he was born, not because of his own merit. That insight changes everything about how you think about the system. If nobody ever explained to you how the system actually works against the people at the bottom, subscribe to this channel. This is where we break down money and power in language anyone can understand. You will not hear this anywhere else. In 1993, Terry Pratchett wrote a character named Sam Vimes, who understood something most economists miss. Vimes was a poor man who could only afford $10 boots. The boots lasted 1 year. A rich man bought $50 boots that lasted 10 years. At the end of a decade, the poor man spent $100 on boots. The rich man spent $50. The poor man paid double for the same protection. Pratchett called it the boots theory. Buffett has referenced this kind of compounding disadvantage when talking about the structural costs of poverty. The mechanism is simple but brutal. You start with less capital, so you pay more for everything. Buying in small quantities costs more per unit than buying in bulk. The 2-ounce shampoo at the convenience store costs 8 times more per ounce than the gallon at a warehouse club. Chicken by the individual piece costs more per pound than the family pack. The reason is simple. Saving money through bulk buying requires capital up front. The wealthy person buys more to spend less per unit. The poor person buys less to spend what they have right now, and ends up paying more per unit every single time. Wealth is deflationary for those who have it. Poverty is inflationary for those inside it. This is not opinion. This is mathematical structure. USDA researchers documented that low-income neighborhoods have 30% fewer grocery stores per resident than higher-income areas. More convenience stores, more fast food, prices running 20 to 40% higher per equivalent unit on the same products. The result is a poor family spending more money to eat food of lower nutritional quality. But the damage does not stop at the wallet. Poor nutrition directly affects health, concentration, energy levels, and cognitive performance. the very resources a person would need to improve their economic situation. The food environment is not a neutral backdrop. It is one more active mechanism in the same loop, pulling in the same direction as every other mechanism, downward. The Consumer Federation of America documented something that should stop anyone who believes the system is purely merit-based. The same driver, with the same vehicle, the same driving record, pays car insurance premiums up to 2 times higher if they live in a low-income zip code, not because they are worse drivers, because the statistical profile of their zip code is higher risk. You are being charged for the economic conditions of the people around you, not for your own behavior, not for your own record. The address on your license functions as a tax you pay regardless of how carefully you drive or how clean your record is. According to the FDIC's 2021 survey, 5.9 million American households are unbanked, no checking account, no savings account, no access to basic banking infrastructure. To cash a paycheck, they go to a check cashing service that charges 1 to 3% per check. On a salary of $40,000 per year, that is $400 to $1,200 in fees every year, just to access their own money. Someone with a bank account receives the same salary by direct deposit. 0 cost. The basic financial infrastructure that is free for those who don't need help is expensive for those who need it most. Utility deposits add another layer. Electric and gas companies require security deposits of $150 to $300 from customers with no credit history. Customers with established credit pay 0 deposit for the same service, electricity, heating, basic living infrastructure. The deposit money sits locked for 12 to 24 months, earning nothing for the customer. Capital that could have started an emergency fund or covered a medical copay or built the beginning of a savings buffer is instead being held by the utility company as collateral against someone's poverty. You are paying extra upfront for the privilege of being someone who cannot afford to pay extra upfront. The circularity is the point. If you are starting to see the structure behind what most people call personal failure, write in the comments, "I see the loop." Because naming the mechanism is the beginning of understanding how to break it. Sendil Mullainathan of Harvard and Eldar Shaffer of Princeton spent 10 years studying how scarcity affects the human brain. Their findings, published in 2013 in the book Scarcity, were unambiguous. Chronic financial worry, not the absence of money itself, but the constant daily preoccupation with it, consumes cognitive bandwidth equivalent to a reduction of 13 IQ points, 13 full points. The kind of drop that shows up on every measure of executive function, decision quality, impulse control, planning ability, resistance to short-term temptations. And this drop does not happen once, during a single stressful moment. It runs continuously for as long as the financial pressure exists. The pressure of poverty is not just felt in the body, it operates directly on the brain. To understand the scale of 13 IQ points, that is the same cognitive drop caused by going an entire night without sleep. Except this is not one night. It is every day, every week, every month of financial uncertainty, continuous, grinding, and invisible to anyone who has never lived it. That bandwidth loss affects the ability to make decisions, to plan ahead, to delay gratification, and to resist short-term temptations that offer immediate relief from pressure. The researchers proved this was not a fixed trait or a cultural tendency. It was a situational response, consistent across all groups tested. Remove the financial pressure and the cognitive performance returns. Restore the pressure and it drops again. What does this mean in practice? The worker who is thinking about how to pay the electricity bill while sitting at their desk performs worse, and not because they lack dedication or work ethic. They perform worse because bandwidth is finite, and a portion of it is already occupied. Research by Anzia in 2017 quantified this at the workplace level. Financial stress is associated with 13% higher absenteeism and 8% lower measured productivity among affected workers. These numbers represent real costs to real people, not just reduced output, but reduced opportunity. Every raise not earned, every promotion not noticed, every training not retained because the mind was partly elsewhere, managing the arithmetic of survival. Munger had a phrase that applies directly here. Show me the incentive, and I will show you the outcome. When every day is about survival, paying rent, putting food on the table, keeping the lights on, the incentive is to solve the present. The future disappears from the frame. The incentive is urgency, and urgency wins every time over planning, because planning requires bandwidth that urgency has already consumed. The system that should help people move forward is structured in a way that consumes the exact resource they would need to move forward. That is not an accident of the system. It is the system. Buffett has talked about the value of mental environment many times. He has said that one of the great structural advantages of his life is the ability to spend his days thinking about business and investing, without having to divide his attention between ideas and the arithmetic of survival. He is not being modest when he says this. He is describing accurately how freedom from financial pressure liberates cognitive bandwidth to generate more wealth. The loop runs in both directions with equal force. Financial security creates cognitive space. Cognitive space creates better decisions. Better decisions create more financial security. At the bottom of the loop, the same mechanism runs in reverse with the same compounding logic. Researchers at Cornell confirmed in 2013 that the cognitive tax is not a characteristic of poor people. It is a characteristic of any human brain under financial pressure. They induced financial worry in high-income individuals by having them imagine a scenario where their car needed a $3,000 repair. Performance dropped the same way. This matters enormously. Poverty does not produce poor cognition because poor people are less capable. Poor cognition is produced by poverty. The cause runs in the direction most people have reversed, and reversing it again, understanding causation, changes what the solution looks like entirely. If this is reframing how you think about poverty and wealth, hit the like button. It helps this reach more people who have never had these systems explained to them. The interest rate you pay is one of the most precise measurements of where you stand in the economic system. Someone with good credit and home equity takes a home equity line at 6 to 7% APR for an emergency. Someone with no credit history and no assets goes to a payday lender at 391% APR for the same emergency. Same $500 needed. Same week of financial pressure. The rich person pays roughly $30 in interest over a year. The poor person pays $200 in 2 weeks. That gap is not a reflection of greater risk from the poor borrower. It is a reflection of options and who controls them. The Pew Research Center has tracked payday lending extensively. 12 million Americans use payday loans every year. The average borrower takes out 8 loans per year. 8 loans in 12 months. That number is the tell. It is not that people take one emergency loan and recover. It is that the loan structure makes recovery almost impossible. You pay off the loan and you need another one within weeks because the fee from the first loan left you short. The product was not designed to resolve emergencies. It was designed to capture a customer in permanent rotation. The business model depends on the borrower's recurring inability to pay. Here is what $300 from a payday lender actually costs. You receive $300 today. In 2 weeks, the lender debits $345 to $390 from your account. If the money is not there, another fee is added and the loan extends. After 3 extensions, you have paid more than $80 in fees on $300 you used for 6 weeks. That is a 174% annualized rate on the most optimistic calculation. On less optimistic calculations, it exceeds 391%. Meanwhile, someone with a 750 credit score used a personal line of credit at 8% for the same emergency. Same problem, wildly different cost. The credit score system does not just reflect poverty, it amplifies it. Someone without a credit history, because they never had access to mainstream credit, starts with a low score. A low score leads to higher interest rates or outright denial. Denial pushes them toward predatory alternative credit. Predatory credit means higher costs. Higher costs mean less capital remaining after expenses. Less capital means the score does not improve. Each piece of this chain connects to the next. The person at the starting line does not just start behind. The track they are on curves back on itself. Munger's incentive principle applies with precision here. For a payday lender, the ideal customer is someone who needs money immediately, has no alternatives, and has insufficient capital to repay on time, because that customer renews. Renewal is where the profit concentrates. Customers who pay on the first cycle are the least profitable. The product, the marketing, the physical locations, payday stores in low-income neighborhoods, not in wealthy suburbs, all optimize for capturing and retaining the most financially vulnerable people. This is not a side effect of the business model. It is the business model, and it is entirely legal. If you have been watching this loop operate in your own life, if you can see the mechanisms clearly, but the gap between understanding and actually changing things still feels enormous, there is something in the first pinned comment below this video. It is for people who are ready to stop seeing the loop and start breaking it. A joint investigation by Kaiser Family Foundation and the New York Times in 2022 found that 100 million Americans carry some form of medical debt. 100 million people in a country of 330 million, nearly 1 in 3. That is not debt from irresponsible spending on luxury goods. It is debt from getting sick, a routine injury, an unexpected diagnosis, a child's emergency room visit at 2 in the morning. The debt that follows is not financial recklessness. It is the predictable, documented outcome of needing medical care without adequate coverage in a system priced primarily for profit, not for access. Medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States. A study published in the American Journal of Public Health estimated that 530,000 American families are forced into bankruptcy annually, with medical costs as a contributing factor. Bankruptcy destroys a credit history for 7 to 10 years. Those 7 to 10 years mean higher interest rates on car loans, apartments, personal credit, and business financing. A person got sick, went into debt, went bankrupt, and now pays a tax in the form of higher interest on every financial transaction for the better part of a decade. The original illness is long over. The financial wound stays open. The loop closes cruelly. Without insurance, a sick person goes to the emergency room, the most expensive entry point in the healthcare system. They receive a bill of $8,000 to $15,000 for a problem that, with insurance, would have cost $200 to $500 in a copay. That bill enters their credit history. The damage credit means higher costs on the next car, apartment, or loan. All of this because a treatable condition was not treated early enough. Because early treatment requires access to a doctor. Because access to a doctor requires either insurance or cash, neither of which they had. Simultaneously, the person with premium insurance visits the doctor for an annual checkup. A potential problem is detected early and treated for a $50 copay. They remain healthy, productive, and financially intact. Their credit score is untouched. Their capital continues to accumulate undisturbed. The same healthcare system, the same hospitals, the same technology, the same medications serves both people, but it produces radically different financial outcomes based entirely on what each person brought into it. The medical system is not only a health service. In practice, it functions as a financial amplifier, expanding the gap between those who entered with insurance and those who entered without it. Buffett made a comparison about health that applies precisely here. He said a person can have a perfectly functional vehicle, every part in working order, but if the engine is quietly deteriorating, no amount of fuel resolves the underlying problem. Health is the engine. When the system is structured to drain the engine of the most financially vulnerable people, charging more precisely when they are most fragile, routing them through the most expensive entry points when they are least able to absorb the cost, the loop accelerates. People who cannot maintain their health cannot maintain their economic momentum, and the gap between those with protected engines and those without one widens every year, compounding silently. Every person, regardless of income, receives the same 24 hours per day. This is the most common argument for equality of opportunity, the one variable that levels all playing fields. But the hours are not spent equally. A 2015 National Bureau of Economic Research study calculated that low-income households spend on average 28% more time on administrative tasks than high-income households, government benefit queues, physical trips to financial services, longer commutes on public transit, managing multiple part-time jobs with irregular and unpredictable schedules. The clock runs at the same speed. The structural demands placed on it do not. Time is equal in theory. In practice, it is rationed very differently. Public transit versus a car. The average public transit commute in the United States is 48 minutes one way. The average car commute is 27 minutes. The difference is 21 minutes each way, 42 minutes daily, 210 minutes per 5-day work week. Over a year of full-time work, that is 91 hours. 91 hours that do not exist for studying, freelancing, resting, or being present with children. Equivalent to 11 full 8-hour workdays. Lost every year. The cheaper option carries a hidden price, not in dollars, in time. 91 hours per year, compounding not as money, but as lost opportunity. Mullainathan named this dynamic tunneling. When you are in survival mode, focused on how to cover this week's rent, this month's bills, today's immediate problem, your attention narrows to the urgent. Everything outside that tunnel disappears from your cognitive field. This is not weakness or lack of vision. It is a documented, measurable cognitive response to immediate pressure, consistent across cultures and income levels. The problem is that escaping poverty requires the exact opposite cognitive mode: long-term planning, deferred gratification, patient investment in skills and relationships that pay off months or years later. The survival system and the construction system are not compatible. Poverty activates the first and simultaneously blocks the second. Both compete for the same finite mental resource. For someone working 2 minimum wage jobs to reach the same income level as a single middle-class job, which the economic structure pressures many poor people to do, the time available for continued education, professional development, skill building, or meaningful networking does not exist. The path out of poverty requires exactly those things: more education, more skills, more connections. But the daily labor required to survive at poverty-level income consumes the hours those things would need. The system of survival blocks the system of escape. Both run on time. There is not enough time for both. Housing adds another time trap. Without enough savings for a 2-month security deposit, averaging $4,000 nationally, many people cannot qualify for a standard apartment. Instead, they live in weekly motels at $300 to $400 per week. That is $1,200 to $1,600 per month for one room without a kitchen, more expensive than many apartments, with zero equity building and no tenant history being established. To escape the weekly motel, you need the deposit. To save the deposit, you need disposable income. The weekly motel consumes the disposable income. The door stays closed. In 1968, sociologist Robert Merton identified what he called the Matthew effect, named after verse 25-29 of the Gospel of Matthew, "For whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them." Merton applied the principle to academic recognition and career momentum. But the mechanism is universal wherever capital accumulates. Advantage compounds on advantage. Disadvantage compounds on disadvantage. The same mathematical principle that Buffett has used to build one of the largest fortunes in history, compounding over time, operates in reverse for those starting with a deficit. At the bottom of the loop, compounding is not an asset. It is a gravitational force pulling in the opposite direction. The upward loop, good credit leads to low interest rates. Low interest rates free up capital after expenses. Free capital can be invested in assets. Assets generate returns. Returns improve the balance sheet. An improved balance sheet leads to better credit terms on the next transaction. Each element feeds the next. The downward loop runs with the same mathematical symmetry. Poor credit leads to high interest rates. High interest rates consume capital before it can be saved. No capital means no buffer for emergencies. One emergency, a car repair, a medical bill, a missed shift, wipes out whatever fragile progress was made. Credit deteriorates further. The next emergency costs even more. Both loops are self-reinforcing. Both build momentum over time, and the gravitational pull inside each loop, once you are inside it, is enormous. Buffett's Ovarian lottery speech is one of the most honest things any billionaire has ever said about wealth and circumstance. He told those students, "Imagine 2 hours before birth, you could design any set of economic and social rules for the society you will live in, but you do not know what position you will occupy. What rules would you choose? You would be terrified of designing a system that leaves the bottom 20% in the conditions that exist today, because you might be in that bottom 20%. He was not being political. He was applying basic expected value thinking to the question of social structure. He was explicit about his own situation. He said that most of what he has is the result of where he was born. Not superior intelligence, not superior work ethic compared to everyone else. A specific aptitude, financial pattern recognition, in a specific time, post-war American economic expansion, in a specific place, the United States, with its capital markets, that happened to reward exactly that skill. He was honest enough to say that if he had been born in Bangladesh in 1930, that same aptitude would have produced nothing close to what it produced in Omaha in 1956. System matters, timing matters, place matters, enormously. Munger's principle of incentives closes the analysis with precision. "Show me the incentive," he said, "and I will show you the outcome." The American systems of credit, healthcare, housing, and education were not designed with the explicit goal of reducing poverty. They were designed to function efficiently in a free market, which means they follow the incentives of that market. And free markets, without deliberate structural corrections, naturally concentrate advantage toward those who already hold capital. Not because of malice, because capital generates returns, returns compound, and compounding over time separates those who started with assets from those who started without any. The outcome you see is simply the incentive structure made fully visible. Thomas Piketty spent 20 years collecting 2 centuries of economic data from 20 countries. His finding, published in 2013, was numerical. R is greater than G. The return on capital exceeds the rate of economic growth. Historically, capital has grown at 4 to 5% annually, while economies grow at 1 to 2%. What this means practically: money generates more wealth than labor does. Those who have capital accumulate faster than the economy as a whole grows. Those who have only labor fall behind relative to the economy as a whole, not through any failure of effort, through the structure of returns. Berkshire Hathaway grew at approximately 20% compounded annually for 6 decades, one of the most documented compounding records in financial history. The broader American economy grew at 2 to 3% annually over the same period. The gap between Buffett's capital returns and average economic growth is R greater than G, lived out in a single portfolio over 60 years. He did not create this structural advantage. He identified where it existed and positioned himself inside it. The practical lesson for anyone not already inside the upper loop is identical in principle. Identify where the structure runs in your favor, even marginally, and position there. Small advantage compounded over time is still compounding. And compounding eventually changes everything. Everything described in this video sounds permanent. It is not. Poverty can feel like gravity because every mechanism reinforces the others, and the combined pull is enormous. But gravity has breakpoints: altitude, velocity, trajectory. The system loop has breakpoints in exactly the same way. Specific places where a deliberate action can interrupt one mechanism, and that interruption changes the trajectory of every mechanism connected to it. Buffett has identified several of these over the course of his career, both in his public statements and in the causes he has funded. They are not revolutionary. They do not require luck or a windfall. They are structural, often small, and surprisingly powerful when applied with consistency. The loop runs on momentum. Interrupt the momentum in one place, and the direction begins to shift. The first breakpoint is the bank account. According to the FDIC, 5.9 million American households are unbanked, paying 1 to 3% of every paycheck just to access their own money through check cashing services. Credit unions, community banks, and online banks now offer free checking accounts with no minimum balance requirements and no monthly fees. Switching from check cashing to direct deposit eliminates that fee entirely. On a salary of $35,000 a year, the recovery is $350 to $1,050 immediately from one decision, with zero investment required. That recovered capital is the seed of everything that follows. A bank account is not just a convenience, it is the first structural repair in the loop. The second breakpoint is the credit score. But not through borrowing to buy things, through building a history that reduces the cost of future emergencies. A secured credit card with a $200 deposit, used only to pay one fixed monthly bill and paid in full every month, costs nothing in interest and builds a credit history. In 12 to 18 months, a meaningful score develops. The cost of a $500 emergency drops from a 391% payday loan to a 20% personal card. That difference, hundreds of dollars per emergency, is the return on the 18 months of discipline. The third breakpoint is what Buffett called the runway, the emergency fund. Without any financial buffer, every unexpected expense enters the predatory credit system automatically. Car repair, medical bill, a missed shift that leaves rent short by $200. Without a runway, every landing is a crash, and every crash costs interest. With $1,000 in savings, even if it takes a year to accumulate at $50 per month, the same events cost zero in interest. The buffer does not need to be large to break the first loop. It needs to exist. $1,000 changes the math on every emergency that comes after it. And changing the math on emergencies is the single fastest way to stop the downward momentum of the loop. The fourth breakpoint is accessible financial education. Not college, not expensive courses. The principles Buffett applies are simple enough to explain to a high school student. Spend less than you earn. Save the difference. Give the time to work. The complexity is in execution, not in concept. Only 21 American states require financial education in high school. States that do show measurably higher savings rates and credit scores in young adults. The information is not secret. The access to it at the right moment in life is the variable. When people receive it earlier, the outcomes shift. The fifth breakpoint is the most paradoxical, and the one Buffett embodies most completely. Time. He spent decades refusing to do urgent but unimportant things so he could protect time for thinking, reading, and planning. For someone inside the poverty loop, recovering time is a high-return investment. Reducing commute time by finding work closer to home, consolidating errands, identifying 1 hour per week that currently goes to low-value activity and redirecting it to skill development or financial planning. 1 hour per week is 52 hours per year. 52 hours of intentional investment in escaping the loop versus 52 hours of the loop continuing. There is one more breakpoint that almost nobody calculates: the cost of not acting. Each year, the predatory credit loop continues, the compound cost grows. $200 in payday loan fees per year over 10 years is $2,000. That $2,000, invested at 10% annually for 10 years, would have become $5,187. The cost of staying in the loop is not only what you lose now, it is what that loss would have become if it had been redirected instead. Buffett thought about every dollar this way. The starting point does not have to be large. The compounding does the work. The system loop is not a political theory. It is a description of mechanism. Poverty is expensive, cognitively expensive, temporally expensive, financially expensive. Each individual mechanism, the poverty premium, the cognitive tax, the credit desert, the medical spiral, the time tax, the housing trap, operates on its own. But together, they create a gravitational field that very few people escape without at least one structural breakpoint disrupting the pull. Understanding this does not excuse anyone from taking the actions that are available to them. Every person operating within this system still has choices to make, however constrained. But it does correctly locate where the problem lives. The problem is not inside the person. The problem is inside the architecture surrounding the person. Buffett understands this. It is why he has supported the estate tax to prevent capital advantages from concentrating so completely across generations that meaningful competition becomes structurally impossible for anyone starting without inherited assets. It is why he supports public education as a fundamental economic infrastructure. It is why he created the Giving Pledge and committed the vast majority of his fortune to foundations rather than passing it intact to his children. Not out of guilt, out of the same systems-level thinking he applies to every investment analysis, a system that concentrates too completely, that seals both loops without any release valves, eventually destabilizes. History is full of examples of what happens when it does. Buffett is not being generous. He is being a very good systems analyst. The question for you is practical and immediate. Which loop are you currently in? And if you are in the lower one, which breakpoints are actually available to you today? The bank account is available to almost everyone reading this. The secured card takes $200 and 18 months. The $50 per month toward an emergency buffer is achievable on almost any income if it is prioritized over one expenditure that does not build anything. The 1 hour per week, redirected from low-value activity toward financial knowledge or skill development, is available to anyone willing to find it. Each breakpoint you activate interrupts one mechanism of the loop. Not all of them, not immediately. But one breakpoint changes the trajectory, and a changed trajectory, compounded over years, is everything. Buffett has said that risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. Now you know what the system is doing. You have seen the poverty premium, the daily cost of being poor. You have seen the cognitive tax, what financial pressure does to the brain. The credit desert, the medical spiral, the time tax. You have heard the Ovarian lottery described by the man who won it. You understand the Matthew effect and what R greater than G means for someone who starts with labor and no capital. Knowing how the loop operates is the first step outside of it. Not the only step, but the first step, taken clearly and deliberately, changes the trajectory of every step that follows. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "I see the system." There is another video on your screen right now, the next step in understanding how money and power really work. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.